morning, everyone. Good evening. I hope you're all well. Hope you've had a good week at work or not at work or whatever you've been doing. Hope it's been a good week regardless. So tonight on my show, I'm going to talk to you about a few things I've been mucking about with this week and a few things that I will be mucking about with over the next week or two. Firstly, I'm going to talk a bit about the Warhawk. Now, those of you that frequent my Facebook page will have seen probably some posts I've done for the upcoming interesting Modelling Co. Festival of Modelling, which is our Telford replacement. I've been asked to do some slots in the demos on the Saturday and the Sunday, and I'm going to be building this to model across that weekend. Now, that's fine. But I got the kit out and I started looking at it, and I thought, it's quite an old kit. It's an old Hasegawa kit. So I thought, okay, let's get a couple of bits to spice it up a bit. I wasn't really very keen on either of the decal options. I've done a Flying Tigers Warhawk before, haven't we all? And the other one was a bit boring. So I spotted these, and I do like that. So I thought, okay, we'll do the Australian one. We'll do it with foil. It'll be cool. And then I thought, I saw these. Can we see those in the light? Yes. Master barrels for the guns. And this includes also pitos and gun sights, which is nice. And then the final thing, one must fit seat belts to one's models. And this is the Edward Zoom set for this model, which includes seat belts. And at £5, probably isn't much more expensive than just a set of seatbelts may have been. So you've obviously got in there as well a photo etched seat, other cockpit details, an instrument panel, etc., etc. So nice little dress up for £5, I thought. So the barrels, the guns were about a £5 as well, and I think the masks were about £6. So not a massive investment, just to spruce things up a bit. Okay, so then with further checking, I thought, well, we've got all these inserts. It's the age of inserts, this kit. So I thought, I'm not suggesting that I can't build this model over the course of a 48-hour weekend. I could, but I thought I'd like it to not be a throwaway model. I'd like it to be halfway decent. So I decided to do some prep work on the model so that come the weekend, I can go straight in on my demo with something a bit more interesting than snipping pieces off the frames and waffling about sanding off mould seams. So I decided to do some of the basic major construction, get these inserts dealt with, basically put all of the decent sized sub-assemblies together so that A, the glue is hardened for sanding, and B, I can go straight in with putting the photo etch into the cockpit, making that photo etch seat up on camera, that kind of thing. A bit more interesting for you guys. So here's what I've glued together. Rattle the wing. And this has thrown up a few interesting points doing this. The spinner. There's some shocking rivet detail on this model, most of which I've actually removed. But here we are with the tails. So this model had separate tails to enable Hasegawa to also kit the big tail version without having to tool a whole new fuselage. There's a nice big chunky attachment tab inside there. And I did the usual. I taped the halves together. I taped the tail together, fitted it, didn't seem great, so I decided to fit each half to its respective fuselage half to enable this joint to be as good as it could be, and if that meant a gap in the top or the bottom, well, so be it. As it happens, it didn't mean that at all. There's a tiny gap in the bottom, but it really isn't much to speak of. It actually did fit extremely well, and the problem, if you want to call it that, with fitting it as two complete parts was actually just that the rear face of the fuselage had a slight V to it. Once that was flattened off, the whole thing slid together properly. But anyhow, they're joined together, and I employed Desmogen's Indian top tip number 611 in order to get this nice joint, and I'm going to do a sketch for you to display what I mean by that. So, where's my pencil gone? Here it is. I had my tailpiece, thus, and the fuselage piece. Now, if you try to join them, I hope you can see those pencil marks. They're quite... I'm going to get a pen. Oh, shit. Sorry, I did a swear. Oh, the pens have deserted me. Here we go, pen. Now, if you try to introduce these pieces just like this, the slightest misalignment of that joint, and it can be tiny, tiniest misalignment of that joint is super visible. So what I did was I beveled each edge deliberately, much like you would do if you were building something like a 109. You just take a tiny angle off of the edge of the fuselage halves down the back, and it gives you that panel line that they have along the rear part of the fuselage. Now, by doing this, I ended up with a joint that looked like that. And the area where this joint was shouldn't have a vertical panel line anyway. So I was always going to have to fill and sand this joint. So I went the route of deliberately introducing this V. It wasn't massive. I mean, we're not talking about the Panama Canal here. It just... And then it was glued with CA glue with talc, and some allowed to sit on top like that. So that once I sanded that back, the joint was basically done. There's no more to it than that. Any tiny vertical misalignments between the parts, they're just so much less obvious, and they're taken out by the whole thing, and it worked a treat. The nose inserts, there's a little one just in front of the exhaust here. That dropped in without any bother anyway. That was just, again, it was glued into position with CA and talc. I let some glue squeeze out, and that was that. Once it's sanded off, it's done. So that's all good. That's done. I've used Mr. Surfacer. As you can see, this has still got the Mr. Surfacer on it, and that is there just so that I can sand that back with the 800 grit wet and dry, used wet, and that just gets rid of any deeper sanding scratches from the coarse sanding boards. Now I'm going to show you the howler. I was genuinely shocked when I did this the first time. You ready for this? If you're not sitting, take a seat. Oh my word, look at that. Yeah. So there's a tiny gap at the wing roots of this model. By golly, the camera makes it look less bad than it is. It's bad. It's cavernous. It's a good 1.5 mil each side. Really awful. So on further investigation, when the cockpit floor is glued is in here, that does spread the half some, which does lessen the gap. But the culprit, in fact, is a warped wing assembly. You can see that that's not very straight, but there's no dihedral there at all, and the P40 does have a fair bit of dihedral. So when it comes to gluing it, I'll just line it up as best I can using the joint here and here, and then prop it up. And when that's done, the gap isn't nearly as bad and should be reasonably quick and easy to deal with, hopefully anyway. So in terms of how much more I'm going to do to this before we get to next weekend's festival, I will sort out the seams on the wings. I will finish prepping, sand down these areas. I will basic paint the interior parts, the cockpit, inside of the fuselage, things like that. So that, as I say, when it comes to my demo, which I currently can't remember what time I'm on. Let me see. Where is it? I think I'm on at 1:15. Well, that's Sunday. No, that's both days. I think I'm on around lunchtime. So by that time, I'll have probably gotten on with some more anyway. But basically, the first of the 2 demos, I will look at the photo etch parts for the cockpit, and the Sunday demos will possibly be foiling, although by then I should probably be out painting the markings and whatnot. But I've got masks for the markings, so either way, I should be able to bring you 2 demos in line with the build that are something a bit better than just snipping pieces off of sprues and whatnot and what have you. So that's what I've been doing with that. Call me a cheater if you like, but hey ho, we all want to have fun, don't we? We don't want to sit and watch videos of people snipping parts off sprues all day. In other news, I picked up a couple of bits from Models for Sale this week. The first of which is this Am I with Mig? How to Paint with Oils, a modelling guide. Now this is, I think the trade term is a bookazine. It's a sort of a thick, stiff back magazine, really. 100 odd pages. And I picked it up because I increasingly use oils in various guises on my models, and I saw it and I thought, I wonder if there's anything useful in there. I don't purport to know everything about this hobby, so can always pick up hints and tips about the place. So I picked this up, and it's a really nice, really good quality publication. It talks about the different types of oil paints and why you'd want to use them, how to prep the surfaces to best use them, and all that kind of thing. Now, understandably, Ammo currently only do oils in the form of their oil brushes, I believe. So it does focus somewhat on using oil brushes. But that said, the techniques are universal. But yeah, I've had a quick flick through it, and yeah, it looks good. Lots of, it's the oil dot method there, talking about blending, different types of brushes, what sort of brushes to use for what jobs, all this kind of stuff. Tells you how to do dry brushing, if anyone doesn't know. And this is what I mostly use oils for, to be honest, is post shading in effect, but rather than using the airbrush, you use oil paints, as you can see here. It does talk a little bit about using the oils to produce wash effects, streak effects, and then it goes into some detail in the back part about painting figures, which is good because it's something I don't, again, have any knowledge of. So this could be quite useful for me, how to do that. A bit of stuff about dioramas, some talk about metallic oils, which is something that isn't very common. I actually think that's quite an interesting idea. Mostly that's all about blending. It's really, really nice. £14 this was. Now, whether or not you use oil brushes or traditional, shall we say, traditional oil paints, this could be quite handy if you're not super au fait with the techniques. Now, I do have some oil brushes, of course, and I also have some ordinary oils, even to the point of having somewhere some of those ones in tubes. There they are. Nice. It's all the same. They're all the same product. These have the disadvantage, as they quite rightly say, and that has, the lids do get glued shut basically, and they can be really hard to get off. But the main difference between your normal oil paint, shall we say, and an oil brusher is the viscosity. The oil brusher oil, you can hopefully see, is considerably thinner than this. So the only problem, if you don't have oil brushes but you do have these and you feel like you're being left out, then don't, because all you have to do to make this into this is just thin it down a touch. And in all fairness, a thinner product isn't always the best idea anyway for the sort of stuff that you do with oils. So I would argue that the fact of having a brush in the lid is pretty irrelevant, because it's not the best brush. It's pretty basic. However, if you're blending larger parts, it's perfectly adequate to just spot it on with a brush and then blend in the normal way. If you need to apply it with more finesse for, say, streaking effects, for example, then simply use a fine brush to put it on rather than the oil brush itself in the tube there. But yeah, quite a nice pamphlet, I think, and as I say, well worth getting if you're interested in the concept of using oil paints for shading and for other effects, but aren't really sure how to go about doing it. It's pretty decent. So there's that. In the tool section, buying things I don't need, I picked this up. This was £4.50, I think, or a fiver. It wasn't much money, from Expo Tools, and this is a wire bending jig. So basically you have some straight lines, you have a circle, and you have a right angle, and there are some holes in which you can insert these pegs, and you can put these pegs in various formations to bend different things. So if you're trying to bend wire and you need a repeatable bend that's always going to be the same, you can put your pegs where you want, do your bend, do your bend, do your bend. Likewise, you can put a right angle into something, move the wire down, put another one in. Just gives you that little bit of precision over and above using a pair of pliers and trusting to good luck. It does include some nifty blue anodized screws for attaching it to your workbench should you desire to do so. And the last thing I picked up, and it wasn't always in this plain clothes box, it didn't come from Ann Summers. This is a Zvezda T3485. I've got quite fond of working on these military models, I must say, and as some of you are aware, I have a penchant for taking serious models and making them into silly models, i.e. World of Tanks. So some of you might recall my T34 from a couple months back, which was done in a paint job representing the one I have in World of Tanks. Well, this one I'm going to build as a T in the game. It's a T3488. So principally speaking, that's a captured T34 that's been fitted with an 88mm gun. I don't know if that was a thing or not, to be honest, but it's a cool tank in the game. I really enjoy playing it, and this kit, as you can see, there's plenty going on there without it being stupid complicated, like, you know, main kits and whatnot. And it was 20 quid or something. It's cheap, so there's that. I won't do a full review because it's not really my scene. I don't know anything about it. It's a tank. Yeah, so the last thing was just today. Two things turned up today in the mail. One, courtesy of Mr. Andrew Hills from Antics Online in Bristol. I'd like to just publicly thank him very, very much for this. I use, for the majority of my paint thinning for spraying, I use Mr. Colour Thinner. Now, what I've always done traditionally, every year at Telford, I buy one of these. I bought this at Telford last year, as you can't see because there's so little in there, you can't see it when I tip it up. There's probably about 50 ml left in there, just in time for Telford, except there isn't one this year. So I had nowhere to go. So I spoke to my buddies and they said, oh, Andy sells Mr. Colour. So I got in touch and he's hooked me up with a new bottle of, this is the levelling thinner, which I don't normally use. This is, I think, it's 10, 11 pounds a bottle. It's expensive stuff. But, you know, if a bottle lasts a year, which it does, it's not the end of the world. So I'll give this a crack and hopefully get on okay with it. And clearly, obviously, he has the Gunze paints. I use both the Aqueous Hobby Colour, which is what this is, and the Mr. Colour. I needed a couple colours for some upcoming jobs, so grabbed those as well. So thank you very, very much to Mr. Andrew Mills for that. Really appreciate it. And if people out there are needing Mr. Colour, if they want to switch to Mr. Colour, if they want to try some out, then give him a shout. He's got the whole range in stock, and his mail order's pretty good too. The other thing, what else arrived today? The crowd roared. Well, I can't talk very much about it. I'm afraid it's going to be the subject of a little chat on Sunday. But the Vesda Herc turned up today. Obviously, I've smashed straight into it. You know, I'm a bit of a fan of the aircraft. Worked on them for 16 years, so you know, it's an absolute blessing. I think, I don't know, blessing. It's probably a bit of a silly way of putting it, but finally, there's a kit that we can all just go out and buy and build, and it looks like a Hercules and not some weird cartoon artist's impression of a Hercules. As I say, I have made a start on this. I am going to be cracking on and getting this built ASAP. Put some of the inside stuff in there. Our first impressions are it's a very, very decent kit, but as I say, I'm not going to bang on about that because I've been asked to join Jonathan on the Interesting Modelling Company broadcast on Sunday evening, and I will no doubt waffle at some length about the kit and the aircraft on Sunday night with him. So for those of you that are interested in that kit and my thoughts on it, do tune in at 7:30 p.m. on Sunday. All right, and the last thing to talk to you about tonight, boiled eggs. Yes, really. Again, those of you that frequent my Facebook page will have seen me boiling some tin foil up the other day. I'm working on this F4, and the metalwork around the back end of the Phantom did get heat stained and filthy. I mean, I had two afterburners blowing past it all the time, so it's going to, isn't it? And I have quite successfully replicated that with paint in the past, but I thought it might be nice to do it with foil. And I had this vague idea of a memory that I remembered somebody boiling bits of tin foil with eggshells and it producing all these grand heat effects. So I thought I'd give it a go. And that's what my photograph was. It was a pan with some eggshells and some bits of foil in it. And here's the result. As you can see, really varied and some quite interesting effects. Like some of them have got this kind of patchy mottled effect almost. I don't know if that's terrifically useful on a model, but it's interesting. Now I did put salt in the water, and I can see evidence in areas of a bit of corrosion on the surface of the foil, which is quite interesting and might be useful actually for some projects. But I need to make some more because I munched through it, to be honest. I put some on the model, scoop, 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 and there it is. And I have to say, I think it's worked really rather well. I didn't foil the arrestor hook, obviously, that's painted, but there you go, look at that. Looks just the ticket. And I have to say as well, especially with that having been, that's just that's just the bare foil. I've not done anything else to it. There's no weathering gone onto that. There's no exhaust, nothing. But apart from being a bit shiny, I think that looks cracking. There you go. Now, I was thinking about actually popping another bit on whilst you watched, but so as not to steal my own thunder from the modelling festival foiling of a Warhawk model epic, I'm not going to do that. But suffice to say that I use microscale metal foil adhesive to put it on, and a cocktail stick, basically. But yeah, really pleased with the way that's come out. And it's certainly a technique I'm going to look into using a bit more often, foiling in general, but also with boiled foil, because I'll tell you for why. Here's my mule cat. This is the Hellcat I use for, it's a spare fuselage from one of the Edward kits, and it's what I use to just test out new paints and colours and varnishes and things. I use it an awful lot when I mix up a matte varnish to make sure I've got it matte enough or not matte enough. As you can see, there's all different levels of gloss here. But a long time ago, I tested the foil glue on this panel here, and this is Reynolds wrap, which is American kitchen foil. It's thicker than the stuff we get over here. Straight onto the model with the foil glue, and then burnished down. And it's super shiny, which is great, but it's maybe a bit too shiny for most models. This side, I tested out some of this boiled foil. Now, to get it flat, for large areas of fuselage skinning, you have to sand it after you've fitted it, just to get rid of any imperfections that you will get because of the glue layer. Doesn't matter too much here because it's a small area. There's a lot of other detail going on, plus it's going to get sooted up and weathered, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're going to foil the whole fuselage, it does. So you have to sand it, and sanding removes this burnished finish. It's clearly some kind of deposit. It's a oxidation of the surface of the foil, so when you rub it down, you lose it, but it's not completely lost. There's still a kind of a patina there, which this doesn't have, and it's, to my eye, very attractive and much more in scale looking actually than unboiled foil. I'm going to have to write a recipe. How many minutes do you boil it? How many eggs do you need? Etc, etc. But I'm going to boil a load more foil, and the P40 will be skinned with boiled foil like this. So we'll see how that works out. I reckon it's going to look pretty decent, but we'll go through that next weekend. And that's about it for now, because as I say, I can't talk much about the Hercules other than to say, yay, it's arrived. 2 thumbs up for that. I am getting on with it. There will be progress photos. I will do more videos later, but between now and Sunday, I'll say no more. So it just remains to say, really, thank you for tuning in. And anyone who watches the replay later, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. It obviously will help the growth of the channel, the more people that look at it and what have you. And yeah, so look after yourselves. Have a great Friday night, and I'll see you next time. That's it for now. Genesis out.